The massive alien ship hung in Earth's orbit like a dark mountain against the stars. Inside the crystalline corridors of the vessel, Ambassador Kethvar adjusted his breathing apparatus one final time. His species had evolved on a world where crystal storms could slice through metal, but somehow the thought of meeting humans made him nervous. "Status report," he commanded in his native tongue, the words creating harmonic vibrations through his crystalline body. "All environmental systems stable," replied his aide. "The human delegation is waiting in Conference Chamber 7. General Vorthake's massive form filled the doorway. His people came from a world where the ground itself was alive and hungry, constantly trying to digest anything that walked on it. Even among Deathworld species, the Morketh were considered extreme. "I still think this is a mistake," Vorthake rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "These humans come from a world that looks almost pleasant. Blue skies, liquid water, green plants. How dangerous can they really be?" Kethvar's features shifted in what passed for disagreement among his kind. "You have not studied their files carefully, old friend. Their world may look beautiful, but it tries to kill them in ways we never imagined. Active tectonics that reshape continents. Weather systems that can level cities. Microscopic organisms that wage war inside their bodies. And that is before we discuss their wildlife." The two aliens made their way through the ship's corridors, passing crew members from 6 different Deathworld species. Each had evolved on planets that would kill most galactic citizens within hours. They were the survivors, the ones who had conquered worlds that fought back. The Deathworld Alliance had been formed 300 years ago when 5 species realized they shared something unique. While most galactic civilizations came from garden worlds with stable climates and gentle environments, they had clawed their way to intelligence on planets that seemed designed to prevent life from existing at all. Now they controlled some of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy, but they were still outnumbered. The Softworld Federation, an alliance of species from pleasant planets, dominated galactic politics through sheer numbers and economic power. The Deathworld Alliance needed allies who understood what it meant to fight for survival every day. Earth had been identified as a potential candidate world 6 months ago. Initial scans showed a planet with an unusual combination of hazards. Most worlds had 1 or 2 environmental challenges. Earth seemed to have them all. Conference Chamber 7 had been specially prepared for this meeting. The atmosphere was adjusted to human requirements, the gravity set to Earth normal, and the temperature regulated to their comfort zone. As the doors opened, Kethvar got his first look at humanity's representatives. There were 5 of them, all wearing simple military uniforms in muted colors. They looked remarkably ordinary compared to the Alliance delegation. No armor, no environmental suits, no obvious weapons or defensive modifications. Just soft-looking beings with pale skin and small eyes. The woman at the center of the group stepped forward. She was of average height with brown hair pulled back in a practical style. Her eyes were calm but alert, taking in every detail of the chamber and its occupants. "I am Colonel Emma Wright, Earth Defense Force," she said in clear, measured tones. "We are honored by your invitation to discuss membership in the Deathworld Alliance." Kethvar noted how she pronounced each word carefully, making sure her meaning was clear despite the translation systems. It suggested either diplomatic training or natural caution. Perhaps both. "I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Torconi Crystal Worlds," he replied through his translator. "This is General Vorthake of the Morketh Empire, Admiral Zexthal of the Void Swimmers, Commander Ythara of the Storm Riders, and Strategic Coordinator Gulaven of the Deep Dwellers." Each alliance member nodded or performed their species equivalent greeting. The humans returned each gesture with what appeared to be genuine respect, showing no fear or disgust at their alien appearance. "Please, be seated," Kethvar gestured to chairs designed for human physiology. "We have much to discuss." As the meeting progressed, the ambassador found himself impressed by the human responses. When shown footage of Torconi crystal storms that could strip flesh from bone, Colonel Wright asked practical questions about frequency patterns and electromagnetic signatures. When General Vorthake described the carnivorous geology of his homeworld, she inquired about mineral composition and geological stability. "Your world presents unique challenges," Wright observed after reviewing data about a dozen Alliance planets. "But I notice your species have all found ways to not just survive, but thrive. Your technology is remarkable." "Necessity drives innovation," Admiral Zexthal commented, her aquatic form rippling in its environmental suit. "When your planet tries to kill you, you learn to kill it back." Wright smiled at this, her expression that seemed both warm and somehow predatory. "We understand that philosophy. Earth has been trying to eliminate humanity for millions of years. We are still here. The formal presentations continued for hours. The Alliance members detailed their military capabilities, their territorial holdings, and their ongoing conflict with the Softworld Federation. They spoke of worlds where the air was poison, where gravity could crush most life forms, where the weather included storms made of living energy. Through it all, Colonel Wright and her team listened carefully, asked intelligent questions, and took detailed notes. What impressed HFY most was their lack of fear. Most species, even tough ones, showed some reaction to descriptions of Deathworld hazards. The humans treated each revelation like technical data to be catalogued and analyzed. Your species shows great promise, HFY announced as the formal session concluded. We would be pleased to begin integration protocols with Earth. Wright stood, her posture straight but relaxed. We accept your invitation, Ambassador. The Earth Defense Force looks forward to learning from our new allies. The handshakes that followed were firm and confident. As the human delegation prepared to leave, HFY noticed Colonel Wright exchanging a brief glance with one of her officers. It was subtle, lasting less than a second, but it carried a weight of unspoken communication. Later, as the Alliance leadership gathered for their private assessment, General Vorthake expressed what they were all thinking. There is something different about them. They were too calm, too prepared. Did you see how they catalogued every piece of technology we showed them? All potential allies gather intelligence, HFY replied, though he shared the concern. It is natural to want to understand new partners. But deep in his crystalline mind, a small worry began to grow. The humans had seemed almost too perfect, too ready for this opportunity. And that smile from Colonel Wright had carried something he could not quite identify. Something that made him wonder if they had just invited predators to join their pack. 6 months after the first meeting, Major James Parker stood on the crystalline surface of Torkan Prime, watching something that should have been impossible. Human soldiers were walking casually through a crystal storm that could cut through battle armor like paper. The razor-sharp formations rising from the planet's surface gleamed in the alien sunlight. Each crystal peak could slice a person in half if they made one wrong step. The electromagnetic fields generated by the storm were strong enough to fry most electronic equipment. Yet Private Thomas Green was teaching a group of young Torcani how to read the storm patterns. You see this shimmer here? Green pointed to a section of air that looked empty to Parker's eyes. That tells you a new formation is about to erupt. You have maybe 30 seconds to move. The young Torcani, beings whose own ancestors had evolved on this deadly world, listened with fascination. They had never learned to predict their planet's behavior with such precision. Their survival strategy had always been to hide and endure. The humans were teaching them to anticipate and adapt. Commander Gextal of the poison-breathing Vectai approached Parker, his environmental suit hissing with each breath. Your people continue to amaze us, Major. In 6 months, they have learned what took our species centuries to master. Parker nodded, but his attention was focused on Sergeant Rebecca Mills. She was demonstrating something new to a mixed unit of Alliance soldiers. Instead of avoiding the crystal formations, she was using them as weapons. With careful positioning and timing, she could trigger controlled avalanches that would crush anything in their path. That is not how we trained her to do that, Commander Gextal observed with concern. No, Parker agreed quietly. She figured that out on her own. This was the pattern Parker had been noticing across all the Alliance worlds where humans were stationed. They did not just adapt to hostile environments. They improved them. They found ways to make deadly planets even more dangerous, but only to enemies. On Morketh Prime, where the ground itself was a living organism that tried to digest anything that walked on it, humans had learned to communicate with the planetary consciousness. Now sections of the surface would actively hunt down intruders while remaining passive for approved personnel. General Vorthake had called it the most disturbing military advancement in Alliance history. Parker's communication device buzzed with an encrypted message from Colonel Wright. The text was brief: report to command. Priority Alpha. The trip back to the orbital station took 3 hours. Parker used the time to review reports from other human units scattered across Alliance space. The data painted a picture that was both impressive and troubling. Human integration scores were off the charts. They excelled in every training scenario, mastered alien technology faster than anyone thought possible, and showed remarkable ability to work with non-human species. But there were other patterns hidden in the numbers. Every world with human advisors had seen dramatic improvements in defensive capabilities. Not just small improvements, but revolutionary changes in how entire planets approached security. Humans were not just learning Alliance tactics. They were rewriting them completely. The command center of Alliance Station Omega buzzed with activity when Parker arrived. The massive space station served as headquarters for joint operations, with representatives from all member species working together. But Parker noticed something new. Humans were now present at every important discussion, their input sought on every major decision. Colonel Wright was waiting in Conference Room 3 with a classified intelligence report. The document was marked with security codes that Parker had never seen before. "We have a problem, James," Wright said without preamble. "The Alliance leadership is getting nervous about our progress." She activated a holographic display showing communication intercepts. The text scrolled past in various alien languages, but the translation was clear. Alliance commanders were discussing the human situation with growing concern. General Vorth AK sent this message to Ambassador Kethvar yesterday. Wright highlighted a section of text. Quote, "The humans are not integrating. They are transforming everything they touch. I fear we have made a grave error." Parker read through more of the intercepted communications. The pattern was clear. Alliance leaders who had initially welcomed human involvement were now questioning whether they had invited partners or something else entirely. "What exactly are they afraid of?" Parker asked. Wright pulled up a tactical analysis that made Parker's blood run cold. It was a complete breakdown of Alliance military capabilities, showing strengths, weaknesses, and theoretical attack vectors for every member species. The level of detail was extraordinary, including information that should have been classified at the highest levels. "They are afraid because we know them," Wright said simply. "We know how their technology works, how their species think, how their planets can be defended or attacked. We know them better than they know themselves." The implications hit Parker like a physical blow. Every joint exercise, every shared mission, every friendly collaboration had been an intelligence-gathering operation. Not by design, but by nature. Humans could not help but analyze and understand everything around them. "There is more," Wright continued, activating another display. "Our defensive installations around Earth were detected last week. The Alliance now knows that we have been building military infrastructure throughout their space under the cover of joint operations." Parker stared at the screen showing the locations of hidden human facilities scattered across dozens of star systems. Each one was positioned to provide maximum strategic advantage, capable of defending allied worlds or controlling them if necessary. "Emma, tell me we are not planning to invade our allies." Wright's expression was unreadable. "We are not invading anyone. But we are also not leaving ourselves vulnerable to betrayal. The galaxy is more dangerous than the Alliance realizes, and we cannot protect them if we are not prepared for every possibility." She gestured to another display showing long-range sensor data. "There are threats out there that make the Softworld Federation look like harmless neighbors. The Alliance invited us to be their partners in survival. We are taking that responsibility very seriously." Parker studied the data, recognizing the signs of hostile civilizations that the Alliance had completely missed. Advanced technology signatures, probe activity, and energy patterns that suggested major military buildup in previously empty space. "How long before they figure out what we really are?" he asked. Wright smiled, and for the first time Parker understood why alien species found that expression unsettling. "They already know, James. They just have not accepted it yet. The Deathworld Alliance thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They were wrong. The War College of Vexthara was built inside a mountain that ate metal. The living rock constantly shifted and reformed itself, creating new passages while sealing off old ones. It was the perfect place for the Alliance's greatest military minds to gather and think about impossible problems." General Vorth AK stood before a massive holographic display showing 7 different battle scenarios. Each one glowed red, marking them as unsolved tactical puzzles. Behind him, the most senior commanders from every Alliance species waited to see what the humans would do. "The Crucible," Vorth AK announced to the assembled human officers. 7 scenarios that led to the complete destruction of advanced civilizations. Each represents a type of warfare that cannot be won using conventional tactics. Admiral Robert Hayes studied the displays with his team. Colonel Wright stood beside him, her face calm as she examined scenarios that had caused the extinction of entire species. Major Parker and Captain Helen Cross took detailed notes, treating the impossible problems like routine homework assignments. "These are real historical events?" Wright asked, her voice showing only professional interest. "Each one destroyed billions of lives," confirmed Ambassador Kethvar. "The Krexnai massacre claimed 7 billion defenders. The inevitable siege lasted 300 years and ended with planetary annihilation. The divine intervention scenario involved godlike beings who could not be fought by any known means. Captain Cross leaned forward to get a better view of the third scenario. What made them godlike? They existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, replied Strategic Coordinator Gulaven. They could not be touched, seen, or affected by any weapon or tactic known to galactic civilization. Interesting, Cross murmured, making a note. The Alliance officers had expected the humans to be impressed, perhaps intimidated by the scope of these historical disasters. Instead, the humans treated each scenario like a technical problem waiting to be solved. We will need 3 days to analyze these properly, Admiral Hayes announced. Of course, Vorthake agreed, though privately he doubted 3 months would be enough. Take all the time you need. The Alliance commanders expected the humans to return with creative attempts, maybe 1 or 2 clever ideas that might work under perfect conditions. No one anticipated what actually happened. 3 days later, the humans returned to the War College with complete solutions to all 7 impossible scenarios. Captain Cross began the presentation with Scenario 1, the Krexnai Massacre. 7 billion defenders overwhelmed by an enemy they could not touch, she stated matter-of-factly. The fundamental error was assuming the enemy would continue fighting by their own rules. She manipulated the holographic display, showing how the untouchable aliens moved through space. The Krexnai tried to fight beings they could not affect. Wrong approach. Instead, you make the untouchable beings affect each other. Her solution was elegant and terrifying. By careful positioning of gravity generators and electromagnetic fields, the untouchable enemies could be forced into the same dimensional space. Once occupying identical coordinates, they would destroy each other through their own exotic physics. Estimated time to enemy defeat, 6 hours, Cross concluded. The Alliance officers sat in stunned silence. They had studied the Krexnai massacre for centuries. The idea of turning the enemy's greatest strength into a weakness had never occurred to them. Major Parker took over Scenario 2, the inevitable siege. A fortress world had held out against impossible odds for 3 centuries before finally falling. Every defensive strategy had been tried and failed. The defenders made the mistake of thinking defensively, Parker explained. They accepted the enemy's timeline and fought on the enemy's terms. Wrong approach. His solution involved a strategic retreat that spanned generations. Instead of defending the fortress world, he would evacuate the population while leaving behind carefully designed cultural artifacts and information systems. Over decades, these would slowly influence the attacking civilization, changing their beliefs and values until they conquered themselves from within. Estimated time to enemy defeat, 40 years, with 0 military casualties, Parker announced. Admiral Hayes presented Scenario 3, the one involving godlike beings with 11-dimensional existence. The mistake was trying to fight gods, he said simply. Gods are not military problems. They are psychological problems. His solution did not involve weapons or tactics. Instead, it used careful information warfare to make the godlike beings believe their own existence was threatened by each other. Immortal beings with infinite power would naturally become paranoid about other immortal beings with infinite power. Estimated time to enemy defeat varies, but conflict becomes self-sustaining within months, Hayes concluded. Each subsequent solution grew more disturbing to the Alliance observers. Scenario 4 involved an enemy that learned and adapted to any tactic used against them. The human solution was to teach them the wrong lessons, feeding them victories that made them weaker until they adapted themselves to death. Scenario 5 featured an unstoppable force that consumed entire planets. The humans demonstrated how to make the force consume something that would poison it from within, turning its greatest strength into fatal weakness. Scenario 6 involved time-traveling enemies who could change the past to ensure their victory. The human solution was to create multiple false histories, forcing the enemy to scatter their efforts across dozens of different timelines until they became too weak to maintain any of them. The final scenario involved an enemy that could not be killed because it existed as pure information. The human solution was to make it kill itself by forcing it to process contradictory information that would cause logical cascade failure. When the presentation ended, the War College fell completely silent. Even the living mountain seemed to have stopped its constant shifting and reforming. Finally, General Vorthake spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. You solved all of them? Yes, Admiral Hayes replied calmly. In 3 days. The problems were not actually difficult once you understood the underlying principles, Colonel Wright explained. The civilizations that faced these scenarios made the same basic error. They accepted the enemy's definition of what constituted victory and defeat. Ambassador Kethvar's crystalline features shifted through what humans had learned to recognize as deep distress. These scenarios represented the greatest military disasters in galactic history. Because the species involved were thinking like prey, Wright replied. They were trying to survive instead of trying to win. The implications of this statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every Alliance species had evolved as survivors, creatures that endured hostile environments through adaptation and endurance. They had never learned to think like apex predators. That night, the Alliance leadership met an emergency session. The humans had not just solved impossible problems. They had revealed that the problems were only impossible for species that thought like victims instead of predators. For the first time since forming their alliance, the Deathworld species began to wonder if they were actually the most dangerous things in the galaxy. The first warning came at 0347 hours, ship time. Captain David Stone was drinking his morning coffee aboard the human vessel Determination when the proximity alarms started screaming. Through the bridge windows, 18 massive Softworld Federation dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace like dark mountains against the stars. Admiral Hayes to the bridge, Stone called over the comm system. Within minutes, the human commander arrived, still adjusting his uniform but looking completely calm despite facing overwhelming odds. Status report, Hayes requested, settling into his command chair as if enemy fleets appeared in his coffee routine every day. 18 Federation heavy cruisers, sir, reported Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell from the sensor station. They are demanding our immediate withdrawal from what they claim is sovereign Softworld territory. The lead enemy vessel was the Peaceful Harmony, a ship 3 times larger than any human vessel. Its commander appeared on the main screen, a tall being with pale blue skin and multiple arms that marked him as a Centauri diplomat warrior. I am Fleet Commander Zalthek of the Softworld Federation, the alien announced. You will remove your forces from this system immediately or face the consequences of your aggression. Admiral Hayes stood slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Commander, this system was claimed by the Deathworld Alliance 6 months ago. We have legal salvage rights here. The Federation does not recognize Deathworld territorial claims, Zalthek replied coldly. You have 1 hour to withdraw, or we will remove you by force. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Around them, the 18 enemy ships began moving into attack formations, their weapon systems powering up with threatening energy signatures. Orders, sir? Captain Stone asked. Hayes smiled, and Stone felt a chill run down his spine. He had served with the Admiral for 3 years, but that particular smile always meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Signal the Alliance fleet to begin retreat Vector Sigma 7, Hayes commanded. Full withdrawal, maximum speed. Stone blinked in surprise. Sir? That will leave us completely exposed. Exactly where we want to be, Captain. The next few hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. The Alliance fleet, consisting of 12 mixed-species vessels, began retreating in apparent disorder. Ships scattered in different directions, their formations breaking apart as if panic had set in. The Softworld fleet, seeing their enemies fleeing, moved to surround the small human contingent that remained behind. Commander Zalthek probably thought he was being clever, trapping the humans while their allies ran away. 18-3, observed Lieutenant Mitchell. They must think we are insane to stay and fight. Signal the determination, resolve, and defiance, Hayes ordered. Begin Phase 1. What happened next would be studied in military academies for the next century. The 3 human ships did not try to fight 18 enemy dreadnoughts. Instead, they began what appeared to be a fighting retreat, moving slowly toward the system's asteroid belt while taking careful shots at their pursuers. Every shot was precisely calculated. Not to destroy the enemy ships, but to demonstrate exactly how easily destruction could be achieved. A perfectly placed blast would disable a weapon system without harming the crew. Another shot would knock out shields while leaving life support intact. A third would destroy a thruster assembly with surgical precision. They are toying with us, Zalthek realized with growing horror as he watched his massive fleet being systematically dismantled by 3 smaller ships. The psychological effect was devastating. Softworld crews, used to fighting enemies who tried their hardest to win, found themselves facing opponents who were obviously holding back. The humans could have destroyed them all within the first hour, but instead chose to demonstrate their superiority through restraint. Admiral, reported the sensor officer aboard the Peaceful Harmony, we are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. The asteroids, they are not asteroids. Zalthek stared at his displays in disbelief. What his fleet had assumed were random space rocks were actually camouflaged installations, hidden weapons platforms that had been watching their every move. The entire system was a trap that had been months in the making. All ships, immediate withdrawal, he ordered, but it was already too late. The hidden platforms activated simultaneously, creating an energy web that disabled every Federation ship's faster-than-light drive. They were trapped in the system with no way to escape or call for reinforcement. Admiral Hayes opened a communication channel to all enemy vessels. "Commander Zalthek, you have two choices. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions of war, or continue fighting and discover what humans do to enemies who threaten our allies." The demonstration that followed lasted exactly 13 minutes. The three human ships, working in perfect coordination, systematically disabled every weapon, every shield, and every defensive system in the Softworld fleet. Not through overwhelming firepower, but through impossibly precise targeting that showed complete knowledge of enemy ship designs. "How do they know our weaknesses so perfectly?" whispered Zalthek's tactical officer. The answer was simple and terrifying. Humans had been studying Softworld technology for months, analyzing every piece of equipment traded through diplomatic channels, every technical specification shared in joint research projects, every detail revealed in peaceful cultural exchanges. While the Softworld Federation had been treating the Deathworld Alliance as potential trade partners, humans had been preparing for war. 16 of the 18 Federation ships surrendered within 4 hours. The remaining 2 were allowed to leave, carrying carefully crafted messages back to the Softworld High Command. The messages contained detailed recordings of the battle, showing exactly what human military capabilities looked like when unleashed without restraint. The psychological warfare did not end there. Over the following weeks, similar engagements occurred across dozens of systems. Softworld forces would arrive expecting conventional battles and instead find themselves outmaneuvered, outgunned, and most importantly, completely understood by enemies who seemed to know their tactics better than they did. Fleet Admiral Margaret Taylor concluded the campaign at Proxima Centauri B, where she faced the combined Softworld Reserve Fleet, over 300 vessels representing 4 to 7 different worlds. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the entire enemy fleet had surrendered without losing a single ship. They had been psychologically defeated by opponents who fought not to destroy, but to demonstrate that destruction was inevitable if resistance continued. The 3-month war ended not with massive destruction, but with the complete collapse of enemy morale. The Softworld Federation had discovered they were fighting an enemy that understood warfare on a level they could not even comprehend. As Admiral Hayes reviewed the final battle reports, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The war had gone exactly as predicted. Every engagement, every tactical decision, every psychological pressure point had been calculated months in advance. The galaxy was learning what it meant to fight humans. The lesson was simple: do not. Ambassador Kethvar found Colonel Wright in the observation deck of Alliance Station Omega, staring out at the blue marble of Earth floating in the darkness. The view was peaceful, almost serene, but Kethvar now knew better than to trust appearances when it came to humans. "How long have you been watching us?" he asked without greeting. Wright did not turn from the viewport. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a face that looked tired but alert. "Since your first scout ship entered this system 18 months ago. We detected your stealth technology about 6 hours after you thought you had hidden from our sensors." The crystalline ambassador's features shifted through what humans had learned to recognize as deep distress. Around Earth, what had appeared to be simple communication satellites and research stations now showed their true nature. Defensive platforms capable of destroying entire fleets hung in orbit like sleeping giants. "The installations around Earth," Kethvar continued. "When did you build them?" "Construction began 3 days after your delegation left our planet," Wright replied calmly. "We finished the basic defensive grid about 4 months ago. The advanced systems came online last week." Kethvar accessed his personal data recorder, calling up intelligence reports that his government had spent enormous resources to gather. "Our analysts estimate you have similar installations around every Alliance homeworld. Hidden facilities scattered across 17 different star systems." 19 systems, actually, Wright corrected. "Your intelligence services missed 2 of them." The simple admission hit Kethvar like a physical blow. The Alliance had committed their best spy networks to tracking human activities, and they had still underestimated the scope of human military preparation. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper through his translation unit. Wright finally turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Because you needed protecting. And because we could not do that job properly while remaining vulnerable to betrayal." She activated the chamber's holographic display system, showing a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. Red zones marked areas that made Kethvar's crystalline form ripple with fear. Threat Assessment Alpha 7, Wright announced as the display zoomed in on a region of apparently empty space. Hostile civilization, technology level approximately 15% above current Alliance capabilities. They have been monitoring your expansion for 3,000 years, waiting for you to develop enough infrastructure to be worth conquering. The data streaming across the display showed energy signatures, ship movements, and communication intercepts that the Alliance had never detected. Evidence of a massive military buildup that had been completely invisible to their intelligence networks. Threat Assessment Beta 3, Wright continued, highlighting another region. Unknown species, estimated population in the trillions. They have sterilized 6 solar systems over the past century, apparently as weapons testing. Current trajectory suggests they consider Alliance space to be their next laboratory. More data flooded the display. Astronomical observations showing star systems that had simply vanished, their light cut off as if something had built shells around entire suns. The scale of engineering required was beyond anything the Alliance could comprehend. How many? Kethvar asked, his voice barely functioning. 43 confirmed hostile civilizations within our local galactic cluster, Wright replied matter-of-factly. 17 more classified as potentially hostile. And this one? She paused, pointing to a vast dark region that seemed to be moving through space. We are still trying to understand what this is, but it is heading in our direction at approximately 1% of light speed. Kethvar stared at the display in horror. The thing Wright had highlighted was larger than some solar systems, and it was clearly artificial. Sensor data suggested it was hollow, designed to carry something unimaginably vast across interstellar distances. You knew about all of this when you joined the Alliance. We identified most of these threats during our first month of membership, Wright confirmed. Your intelligence networks are very effective at monitoring known civilizations and established trade routes. They are not designed to find hostile species that actively hide their presence. The ambassador processed this information, his crystalline mind working through the implications. And you said nothing to us. Wright's expression hardened slightly. Would you have believed us? Or would your governments have accused us of fabricating external threats to justify human militarization? Kethvar had no answer because he knew she was right. The Alliance leadership would have dismissed such claims as human paranoia or manipulation tactics. Here is what is going to happen, Wright continued, her tone remaining conversational despite the magnitude of her words. Alliance space is now under human protection. Your governments remain autonomous. Your cultures develop as they choose. Your species make their own decisions about internal affairs. But military policy that affects existential survival is now a human responsibility. And if we refuse this protection? Wright smiled, and for the first time Kethvar understood why that expression made other species uncomfortable. It was not malicious, but it carried absolute certainty. Then you refuse. We are not conquerors, Ambassador. We do not force our protection on unwilling recipients. But understand this, once something falls under human protection, it stays under human protection. She gestured toward the viewport where Earth's defensive installations gleamed in the sunlight. Those platforms you see? They are not just defending Earth. They are defending everything we have decided is worth protecting. That now includes every Alliance world and every Alliance citizen. Kethvar felt something he had not experienced since his species first learned to predict crystal storms, complete helplessness in the face of forces beyond his control. The Deathworld Alliance invited humanity because we thought you were like us, he said slowly. You were correct, Wright replied. But you made one critical miscalculation about what that meant. Which was? Wright turned back to the viewport, looking out at the galaxy that humans now quietly controlled. You assumed that surviving a Deathworld made us fellow survivors. What it actually made us was the thing that other things need to survive. The truth settled over Kethvar like a cold weight. Humanity had not joined the Deathworld Alliance as partners. They had joined as guardians of species too limited to protect themselves from the real dangers lurking in the darkness between stars. We are no longer the apex predators of the galaxy, are we? He asked. Wright's reflection in the window showed that unsettling smile again. You never were, Ambassador. You just never realized what was hunting you until we arrived to keep it away. Outside the station, Earth's defensive platforms continued their silent watch, protecting a galaxy that was only just beginning to understand how much protection it needed.